tantric engagement, contrary to what most people think, has very little to do with sex and everything to do with the nervous system and how the body engages in the world and how you use the body as a vehicle for the divine, so to speak, right? And that includes relationships, but it's not nearly as much sex as you would think.
You're listening to the Almost 30 podcast, a lifestyle podcast hosted by Krista Williams and Lindsay Simsick.
Tune in for a new episode every Tuesday to hear our honest conversations about topics like wellness, entrepreneurship, spirituality, and self-development with guests who are really smart, really inspirational,
and really fucking funny. It's real, it's raw, and it's unfiltered.
Inspired by our transition from our 20s to our 30s, we realized it's so much more than that. Our mission is to provide you with the tools, guidance, and motivation to help you navigate any transitions in your life and propel your personal growth.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Almost 30 podcast.
Here we go.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Almost 30 podcast.
Sometimes we do a formal intro, sometimes we don't.
Sometimes you don't, but today I'm feeling it. Today I'm feeling like telling you guys what this podcast is about.
Tell them, sister.
Well, Lindsay and I started about 2 years ago on our closet floors. We've really grown the community and the podcast since then. And now we talk about transitions. We really run the gamut of topics.
Yeah, we do.
It's true.
Yeah, it's really true. The community is everything to us. Mm-hmm. If you haven't joined our secret Facebook group, 8,000 women in there talking every day, supporting each other, all of that. And yeah, we know this is so much more than a podcast. Yeah. And we honor that every day.
And we honor everyone in the community. Mm-hmm. It means so much that you guys are always there for one another and that you guys are all about making this grow, but all about making yourselves grow and supporting, everyone else. It means a lot.
Yes.
I just Theragunned my whole body. And I need to tell you guys about it.
I got a Theragun. They're actually based here right in Santa Monica. Mm-hmm. They're pretty close. But anyway, I had to go through an hour-long seminar to get to know the Theragun just in case I wanted to pop it in my vagina or something.
I was going to say you got Theragun your clit.
Literally, they were like, don't put it in your private parts. We were like, I know, it's a jackhammer.
Literally.
I'm like, I won't.
Yeah, don't worry.
I'd be sterile.
Yeah. Yeah, you would not know what happened to your innards.
Ooh, it's intense. It's percussion therapy. So it's really getting below into the deep muscle, layers of the muscle.
Is it battery operated?
Yeah, you have to it's about 30 minutes of charge. So
you charge it.
I charge it.
Okay.
It's an intense battery.
You guys, it's an intense little gadget. Just look up Theragun, but I just did my whole body. We need to get the trampoline in here.
Gotta get the trampoline.
We gotta get a trampoline in the studio.
Done.
So we can jump.
Yeah.
I have one in my car, but I just don't know how to set it up.
I'll just hang it on the wall.
Yeah.
We're not using it.
I know. Justin's like, can I hang my bike on the wall? I was like, mm-mm. Mm-mm. Nope.
Unless it's cute. But it would just get dirty on the wall too. That would annoy me.
We're not. It's like a Portland thing. You know what I mean? Literally.
Let's put our galoshes on the wall.
Mad love to Portland because it's my favorite city, but that's a very Portland thing to do. Just lift your bike up and put it against the wall. Hilarious. Okay, so Jess and I, when we were away this weekend, I found this article. It's one of those things where sometimes I literally read articles online once a year. And I found this and somehow it was so harrowing. It was crazy. It's called The Case of Jane Doe Ponytail. And it's on New York Times, so you guys can search for Jane Doe Ponytail. And I shared it in our secret Facebook group. But basically, it was a story about this woman who came over here from China. And she came to New York, to Flushing in Queens, with her husband, her husband was a lot older than her. And he ended up being very sick. And she tried to work a bunch of different jobs in New York and then basically ended up in the massage industry or prostitution. So she was in Flushing. And in the 40th Street, there's an area in Flushing that has really, really high rates of prostitution. And it told her story. And there was a point where the cops came. So the cops came to her like massage studio and she ended up jumping out the window and killing herself because she was about to be like arrested and killed. And it was just like really interesting. And I actually read, it's a very long article, but I read the whole thing and I read it out loud to Justin. And it was just like one of those things where, you know, you're like put in this person's life and in this world that you have no idea about. And, you know, people joke about like rub and tugs, or, you know, that's what they say, or, you know, massage studios where people do like perform sex and stuff like that. And it's just so much more than what you think. And, you know, these poor women are selling themselves, you know, are having sex for $80, $100. And, you know, of course, this is very different than if you are a sex worker and you are in the industry by choice and you are excited by it. And you know what I mean? It works for you. For them, it was something that was like very painful for her. And she felt like she had to do it as an immigrant because she didn't have certain skills that she needed to have certain types of jobs. They saved a lot of money and they tried to open up restaurants that failed, you know, and then her husband can't work. And once you're in that, you know, a lot of times, and this is what the article shed light to, it's very hard to get out, you know, and she would be arrested. And this is the thing too, is she would get arrested. And then a lot of the other women there was a lot of women that are there that were like 60 and they were like, you know, I'm too old to be doing this, but like, I don't know, you know, what else to do. So they'll get arrested. And it's actually nice in New York, they start new programs where they kind of are more therapy sessions for the women, where they're kind of helping them get on their feet and addressing the root rather than just arresting them, because you really just can't keep continuing to arrest these women because it's not really like helping the problem. And a lot of times she said, she was like talking about there are men that own the apartment buildings of these places and charge them per person. So they'll like take a cut of like whatever they're making.
Like a pimp.
So exactly. So they'll have like pimp situations, or men that will own buildings and not pimp them out, but charge them like per room or something like that. So there's a lot of times where there's like certain men that are aware of what's going on in these situations, profiting off of it and making it even harder for these women to like earn a decent living, be protected. And that's the thing is like for sex workers, you know, we need to make sure that like people are protected. You know, if you are in that industry, or, you know, for this woman in particular, like if for what she's doing, it's like she was raped often. She was beaten often. You know, she was treated horribly. And that's like the thing is like making sure that they are protected. They are treated fairly. They are like getting paid appropriately for whatever they're doing if they choose to be in that industry. But it was just so eye-opening.
And I often wonder, like, if they're getting arrested, are the men that are, or women, you know, whoever is paying for the services, are they getting arrested? Probably not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it's going to keep happening.
100%. And they should be just as, and you know what? A lot of times there was instances too where policemen would come in and put a gun to her head. And like
rogue.
Honestly.
Wow.
And that's the thing too. It happens a lot, you know, I don't know, just like shitty situations like that. But it was just like a harrowing tale of this woman's life. And I was just so thankful that, you know, I stumbled across it and that there are journalists that still write stuff like that, that her life, she didn't die in vain. You know what I mean? Her story is out and now people are just like exposed to what's going on. So we have more of an understanding of like how people are being treated and what's going on. So it was just so nice to see that, you know, there is still like good journalism and that's interesting and thoughtful and powerful too.
I'm glad that they also have like that program where they can kind of like, what did you say?
Yeah. It's a program that they do in New York. So they're kind of getting more hip to the fact that they can't just like arrest, you know, these women and fix everything.
They already have trauma of not knowing who's going to come into the room, of people who are engaging in this and fearful that they will be found out. Therefore, you know, if anything goes a little wrong or say they're fearful that it might get out, they will possibly turn to violence. Like they're just kind of always scared, I can imagine.
Always scared.
So
says they emotionally, this is from the article, emotionally manipulated by their bosses, ashamed of what they do, afraid to trust, the women rarely confide in the police or even their lawyers about their circumstances. They might be supporting a family in China or paying back a smuggling debt or choosing this more profitable endeavor over, say, restaurant work. No matter the backstory, the police say their collective silence further complicates law enforcement efforts to build racketeering and trafficking cases against the operators. So it's so many like, this is actually good. So they said with the New York police, we've actually switched more of our emphasis away from prostitutes and begun focusing much more on the pimps who sell them and the Johns who pay for their services. Like all crime, we can't just arrest our way out of this problem. So they're moving to change the mindset, which is good. But I mean, it was crazy too. I was like reading it out loud to Justin, and it was just like, it's really good to just have him hear, you know, that perspective. And
totally,
you know,
because it's not, it might not be in his or maybe just men in general, their daily kind of intake. You know, they might be looking at sports. They might be looking at like just the headlines, but for something like that, I completely agree.
Yeah. So that article was from New York Times, and then it's in the secret Facebook group. But yeah, I thought that was crazy. And that was really like stuck with me. Oh,
that's beautiful. I mean,
it's a beautiful article.
Yeah.
It's beautiful journalism. I was like, oh, it was like one of those where it like took me there. You know, the writing. I was like, oh, I feel like I'm there.
Wow. My dad grew up in Flushing, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Well, today on the podcast, Michaela Boehm.
Ah,
sweetheart.
Oh, I want to hug her right now. She's a great hugger.
She's the best.
She was so adorable. She was a delight. And it was nice. It was kind of a refreshing conversation. We haven't talked about relationship, sexuality, you know, in a while. So it was nice to kind of bring that back to the airwaves and kind of reignite that conversation within our community around relationship.
Yeah, she's a teacher, speaker, and counselor. She travels all over the world. She taught with David, I'm going to say this wrong, Data. I did it. It's right. That's right. She co-taught with David Data for 13 years. And she's just extensively trained in also multiple forms of like body work and yoga. So that's kind of integrated into her teachings as well. We just had a really deep, beautiful conversation with her. I think you can never go too deep when it comes to unwrapping, you know, programming we have around relationships and intimacy, and really just getting as real and as raw as possible, because that's what it is. Intimacy is real and raw. So like making sure that the conversation around it reflects that. And she does so beautifully. She lives right here in Ojai.
Yeah.
California.
At a beautiful space. And I think it was before we started recording, but she was talking about how her house burnt down.
Yeah.
She lost everything in the fire. And it was, you know,
lost animals too.
Oh my God. Heartbreaking.
I know.
She lost her animals. She lost everything. And I mean, I can only imagine that happening. You know, it was just, she is a beautiful, dynamic, strong woman, you know, that has something to say. We talked about too, The Wild Woman's Way. So that's her book that is out. And that's about unlocking your potential for pleasure. I love the title. Yeah. I love it. So The Wild Woman's Way is her book.
I just bought a necklace with a bull on it, and it means I'm wild.
I mean, she's wild.
Untamable.
It's a message for any man.
It's my way. Anyway. Okay. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to talk about it, turn to our Secret Almost 30 podcast group on Facebook. Everyone's the best, so supportive, funny, honest.
People say all the time, they're like, this is my tribe. I found my tribe. I found my community. I found my people. And it's because of the amazing people that listen and the amazing people that connect in the community.
Okay, we love you. Thank you again for listening. We'll see you on the other side.
See you on the flip. Guys, I am so pumped. Justin couldn't believe that we are working with NutriBullet because my nickname at home is Jamba Juice. I am, much to his dismay, I am blending things up at 6 a.m. I am blending things up in the evening. I make smoothies, my teas, everything like that. So when NutriBullet said that they wanted to work with Lindsay and I could not have been more honored.
Yeah, truly. It's a brand that they've been around for so long. They've evolved with kind of the trends and the needs of people who are really serious about health and wellness. I'm just obsessed with this brand.
I am too. And then we've been working with them. So before I had the regular NutriBullet and I loved it, I've had it for years and years. And so I was really thankful that they sent us the balance. because I have a tendency to
overpack
my smoothies. And I put so much in there, and a lot of times I can get all the nutrients I need and not have as much. So it's kind of been a good eye-opening thing for me to have the balance, the NutriBullet balance, and then have the app and sort of track and see how much and how many calories and fat and carbs of everything in my smoothie that I'm putting in. So I'm not being hard and fast with anything, but it does really help me understand my nutritional macros and, whatever I'm having for my breakfast so that I can kind of take that into consideration for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it's so great. And it's not intimidating. I'll be honest, sometimes when brands say they've made things more high tech, I get nervous. This is so user-friendly, not intimidating at all. It's kind of fun. It makes the smoothie making, or if you're making soups or dressings, whatever you're making, really, really fun. So they've collaborated with nutritionists, dietitians, app developers, and just created this really fun experience. And you can customize it to fit your own needs, and you will just enjoy it. It's like one of those things where you're like, oh, this is actually fun.
They have tons of recipes and smoothie types. Like you can be like, I want low sugar, or I'm diabetic, I'm vegan, I need high protein. So on the app, you have the ability to get all these amazing recipes tailored to whatever your diet needs are.
Yeah. And so with the help of Bluetooth technology and the Smart Nutrition sensor, it's able to actually tell you the calories, protein, carbs, fat, and sugar intake based on the ingredient volume in the actual container of the NutriBullet balance. So it's really exciting technology, making your life easier. The more you know, I think it's just really powerful to have that information as you nourish your body. So for our listeners, we're really, really excited. We get to offer you 25% off if you use the code almost30 at checkout. So you can go to NutriBulletBalance.com and use our code almost30 for 25% off. So that's NutriBulletBalance.com. Code is almost 30 for 25% off.
Everyone asks us, they're like, Are you taking CBD? What are your thoughts? And I actually didn't think it worked until I started to take Moellans. So I've been using it just at night when I kind of need to relax. I've had a long day. My mind is going and I don't want to be anymore. And it's really helped me to unwind and just kind of chill out.
I am obsessed with the Lip from Within right now.
Yeah.
So not only does it have CBD and very low levels of THC, so it's less than 0.3%, but it also has coconut oil, avocado oil, pumpkin seed oil, and hemp extract. So I am putting this, in my teas. I can even just put it underneath my tongue, but I like to put it in things, beverages, spreads, whatever you want. It restores emotional balance, limits side effects of any stress I'm feeling. It just kind of brings me back to feeling like my best self. And I love this brand. Amy Duncan, the founder, truly cares about what we put in our bodies, and her passion for CBD as something that can heal from the inside out is really palpable, even when you meet her. She's the best. So Moellans.com, and you can use our code almost30 for 10% off your first order. So that's MOWELLENS.com and use the code almost30 for 10% off.
Enjoy. But I've been thinking about claustrophobia and how I really hate to be in places that have low ceilings. And this is maybe a little conceited, but I'm wondering if it has to do with my aura and my energetics and my energetic body, because I honestly, if I'm in a low ceiling place or am I in an enclosed place, I feel so trapped.
That's interesting.
And now high ceilings is number one. I feel so much more comfortable in places that have very, very high ceilings. And it's very I notice that in spaces that I'm in, I'm I don't feel good in places that have very low ceilings or feel very low.
Yeah. Well, our nervous system knows exactly what it needs.
Yeah.
If you just listen to that, it's all fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd like it in Europe then, because they have these extra high ceilings, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's so nice.
Yeah.
Everything's like tall and narrow. So from transitioning from living in West Hollywood to Ojai, what has that felt like for your nervous system and like physically for
It was
you?
amazing, right? It was, I could feel, because in the beginning I would still commute, right? Because I had an office on the corner of Beverly and Crescent Heights, like in the middle of everything.
Wow.
And so I'd commute in on Tuesday morning and then out on Thursday night. And I could tell the difference by the time I came out on Thursday. I was like, so wired.
Yeah.
And then by Saturday, I was totally calmed down and relaxed. I could feel my body and everything was fine. And then by Monday afternoon, right, I would start tensing up because I had to go back in there and drive and stuff like that. So in a very short period of time, it was just, I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I'd do just a day. And then it was like, nah, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Just put everything on Skype and that was that.
Yeah.
know,
Did
I
you have
think
any
about that
anxiety
too.
about kind of like not being or like in the mix, like in a busy
I
place?
definitely did, because when you live in West Hollywood, as long as I did, I lived there for like 17 years or so. And, I arrived in LA when I was 26 or 27 and I had to go back to school. It's a long story, but I worked at Fred Siegel on Melrose.
Oh, cool.
So,
As you
it
do.
was all hip and cool and everybody knew everybody and, you'd go out every evening. And so that's kind of was my West Hollywood experience. By the time I left, I was in my late 30s and was married. So it wasn't quite the same thing. But, you constantly see all the new stuff and the way the people were dressed and the new restaurants and, all of the stuff that we kind of take for granted living in LA. And that was all gone. Like, because back then Ojai now is kind of a hipster paradise, but back then it wasn't. There were like 4 restaurants in town.
Really?
We still don't have an Indian restaurant, and I love Indian food.
You should open
Who's
one.
the one celebrity
Right, because I have
that
so much free time.
I know, so much free time, Michaela.
But so it was really strange. Now I can't imagine living there anymore.
Wow, yeah.
I can't
feel
imagine
the
living in
same
West
way.
Hollywood either.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about New York. We used to live in New York, and I'll go back and visit, and because I know that I'm able to leave, I'm okay with being there, but I can't imagine myself living there
and
anymore.
New York's like LA on steroids. Right?
Yeah.
So
I do wonder if I sometimes think I'm like, if I lived in Ojai or I lived in like South Dakota or something like that, I'm like, I wonder if I could get more done, because I do wonder if some of my energy is drained without me knowing it, just from living in the city. And when you're driving, you have your energy drained in traffic, or when you're around cars or sounds or
definitely
light pollution.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You definitely have your energy drained. And even if you don't have your energy drained, you get numb, right? And that numbing, just over time, you just can't feel that much anymore. But the difference between North Dakota and Ojai is that you can get into LA in an hour and a half. So you can always get the hit of that kind of, and I mean, shopping and stuff like that is so much more fun. But then when you're out there, there's just nothing to mess with your system, right? So, and you were talking earlier about aura and subtle body. Certainly your subtle body, when constantly somebody kind of rubs on you, right? By people and energies and loud and noise, it certainly makes you more irritable. You have to work harder to relax, I think.
100%.
Yeah, I want to talk about kind of the nervous system and how we like our relationship with ourselves and with other people and kind of how that intertwines. Could you first introduce yourself to our, I know we jump right in, but I figured just to kind of close the loop, who you are and how you started this work and why you are so passionate about it.
That's my first question.
Yeah, go for
it, Who I am? Well, I'm Michaela, last name Boehm. I'm an intimacy and relationship expert amongst many things, but that's kind of the more official title. My background is kind of an interesting background in the sense that I have a very formal education in the realms of psychology and Jungian psychology particularly, and went very deep into both dream explorations and archetypal work fairly early on. And at the same time, I had the incredible fortune of meeting people, amongst them the woman who I call my teacher, who gave me an education in the realms of embodiment and tantric engagement. And tantric engagement, contrary to what most people think, has very little to do with sex and everything to do with the nervous system and how the body engages in the world and how you use the body as a vehicle for the divine, so to speak, right? And that includes relationships, but it's not nearly as much sex as you would think when you listen to, neo-tantric stuff. So I'm combining the psychology, the archetypal work, the work that I developed in response to the embodiment and the tantric teachings. And I also worked as a relationship counselor and counselor in general for 17 straight years, like 9 people a day, 5 days a week. So I did about 40,000 client hours in my career. And that, of course, means that I have a vast background in how do people relate to each other, what works, what doesn't work, what makes something a long-term relationship that works versus how is dating and why would you date or why would you get married? So all of those kind of areas where people have a lot of questions because it's the one area where we don't get educated. That's kind of my field. And you were asking, why am I so passionate about my work? Well, one of the reasons is exactly that, because with fairly little education, you can make a huge difference in somebody's life, both individually and in a relationship. And that to me is very, very important, that the things I do and the extreme practical nature of my work is what I'm passionate about. I don't want it to be just the thing that you read about and talk about. I want it to be so that you can apply it and very quickly see the results or the outcomes. Sometimes it's not a result. It's more like, and then you start playing around with certain things and then you see the whole...
it's like a butterfly effect. It's like a butterfly effect.
Totally.
Almost like the little tiny things, and then you kind of see it affect everything else. Wow.
So that's one of my big passions, is to make sure it's very, very practical and it's easily integrated in life, because I don't think people have the time anymore or the bandwidth or the attention span to immerse in something for, even hours or days or years, right? So it has to be maximum depth with minimum time engagement.
And where did you grow up? Like, how did you have such a comfort with this topic? Because for some, like for me growing up, I wasn't necessarily comfortable, or I didn't feel, I guess there wasn't like a comfort around the topic of intimacy and love. And I didn't know what embodiment was, and I didn't know much about relationships, and no one really taught me. So how did you grow up, and how did it give you this like freedom and ability to communicate in this way?
Well, I'm European, and that helps
a lot,
of course, right? It helps a great deal because there's way less hangups around these things, and it's a lot more natural to engage with the body and engage with sexuality and engage with nudity, for instance, right? It's not unusual for people in Europe to go to these baths, right? We have these hot springs and stuff like that. Everybody's naked, and it's not a funky sexual thing. It's just, this is what humans look like without clothes, right? So that certainly is one aspect of it. The other thing that I really have to say is that I hit the jackpot as far as families go. And I can't say enough about that, because my parents are just really cool people, like really cool people. And still are, and they're still both very much alive and very full, right? Even though they're in their 70s, they haven't shrunken down or back or gotten really weird. They're still very much in life, living life, being with each other, having a proper relationship. And so those are the people I grew up with. So my father was very intent on the body being used the way a body needed to be used. And I hated it. Every freaking weekend. In the winter, we would have to go skiing. In the summer, we would go hiking. And it was just like, particularly when you hit puberty, it's the last thing you want to do. Get up at 7 a.m. on a Sunday to go out on the slopes. But because of that, and because of the strong emphasis my parents placed on the body being used and moved and nature and being outside, I had the kind of upbringing that set me up well, right? Because I was in a family that was very functional and loving. My parents were very affectionate with each other and with me and my sister. It's not that it was all idyllic. I had a fairly contentious relationship with my sister who was 5 years younger. So I'm saying this to say it wasn't all fairy tale, but in the biggest sense, I had a pretty damn perfect upbringing in the sense that I had a lot of autonomy and freedom within very strict boundaries. My parents, when I look back at it, had this really, I don't know how the hell they did this, but I was raised really strict in some areas. Like I could never be home after midnight till I left the house with 18. I had to be home by 10 till I was 17.
My curfew was 11:30.
Yeah, 11:30 seems a bit more reasonable than 10 when you're at a party.
But what are you going to do? It's so funny. What are you doing at that party?
Well, exactly. But that's not the point when you're 16.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was never allowed to sleep over outside the house.
Me either.
That's interesting.
Oh my God, my parents could not wait to get rid of me.
My dad was like, "What's the point?" I was like,
my God.
"Because
the whole thing is the point.
The whole experience." And he's like, "You're going to be tired. You're going to be in a mood tomorrow." Blah 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 blah. And I was
that's bizarre.
Okay, but I wanted you so bad.
Yeah. See, I never even knew that it was an option somehow, right? I later on found out that that's what was done. That never occurred to me, which is kind of funny. And when I would come home, I'd have to breathe on my father so he could smell if there were cigarettes on my breath and stuff like that. So I had very, very strict rules in a certain way. But within that, I had such freedom.
Yeah.
I had a little motorcycle. I was out and about. I could go wherever I wanted to go during the day, as long as I was home by 10. And so it was interesting, the juxtaposition between really strong boundaries and total freedom. And I used that to the fullest in the way that I was constantly exploring stuff and going places. And when I was younger, I spent every day at the stables cleaning horses, hoping that one day I could ride one, and stuff like that. Nobody cared where I was within the boundaries of what was, was told. And that certainly set me up and gave me the kind of robustness that makes it possible for me to do what I'm doing, because I'm not particularly tortured from my childhood. I had, like anybody else, some pretty insane experiences later in life, but my childhood was very love-filled and affection-filled, and sexuality and nudity and all of those things weren't a big deal.
So you saw your parents be very in love and affectionate, and
I still do, interestingly enough.
What do you think it is that makes their relationship so strong?
Well, I definitely would say that a lot of what I look for when I look at couples is the very markers that my parents display. And because, of course, they never read a book, right? They never went to a workshop. They never did any of the things that we now have access to. They just figured certain things out. And one of the things that they did that is one of the markers of good relationship is they did things separate. They didn't spend every moment of every day together. They had their own lives and their own domains and very different responsibilities when it came to raising us or making money or dealing with the house. So they had their areas, and that's what they were responsible for. And there was very little overlap in the responsibilities. Of course, we were a family and things like that. They also went on vacation by themselves. My mother would go with a girlfriend and go to Greece or something. And my dad would go wherever he would want to go, both professionally and also personally. So then they would come together, and then they actually were full human beings who would relate to each other, not as just mom and pop, but as two humans who had something to offer to each other. They still do this. My dad still goes out by himself on Tuesday evenings, and my mother has things she does, and they have very individual personas. And when those two come together, they are still a spark. They're still very loving and affectionate. And I was just home in June, and I walked into the kitchen, and my parents were kissing.
Oh.
And it's so cool.
Did you go, ew?
Not anymore. I went through a phase like that too, yeah. But
I'm going to my room.
Yeah. Well, I no longer have a room. That's the sad thing. And my ex-room is now my father's office.
Oh, yes.
I haven't lived home in, God, I don't even want to say that, 30-something years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
There's a sense of like peace, I would imagine, like with just like the state of your relationship when you can take time apart. You know, I just think, you know, now, and this is a very blanket statement that does not apply to everyone, but a lot of relationships happening in your 20s, I feel like I've seen friends too, where you kind of like decide your schedule and what you're doing and how you're feeling by your partner and your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is. And so there's this sense of like desperation or like attachment that is not healthy. So I mean, that is like goals right there, is to be able to detach and to be able to have just this sense of peace around your relationship, so that like if you are to travel when you're not together and to be able to like bring those experiences to the table to talk about. I mean, if you're spending every waking moment together, what do you have to talk about?
To talk about.
Exactly.
Well, that's the depth of the sexual relationship right there, what you're describing.
True. Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because so often I feel like there's this thing that happens when people get married or they're in relationship, they're dating, and it's like hot and heavy and amazing. And then they get married and it's still kind of new and amazing. And then like a lot of people talk about, I'm not married, but like we're at plateaus.
Yeah.
And then, you know, after kids, it's all downhill, or after this, it's all downhill.
Yeah. And that's seen almost as an inevitable fate.
Yeah.
Right?
I know.
And it's kind of an interesting thing, because when you watch it from the outside, it's, oh my God, this is so amazing. We're so compatible. It's so great. This will never happen to us. Right. And then I always love that when people who just got together run relationship seminars telling everybody else, you know, how to have a relationship 6 months into their relationship. And it's like, oh, you wait, you know, and all the things you say you're never going to do, you start doing. And the reason for that, and this is, I've said this many times in interviews, and I actually wrote about it in detail, because it's so important when you understand it. It totally takes kind of a pin out of that hamster wheel of inevitability, which is that what makes a relationship good is the very thing that kills your sex life. And that it's a total mindfuck. But when you know what that is, then you can deal with it. So relationship is based on sameness. What that means is that the more you have in common with somebody, the better your relationship. This is not only true for intimate relationship, right? You two are friends. The more you have in common, the better you communicate, the more your preferences align, the more people you know together, the more harmonious the interaction will be. And this is also true for intimate relationship. So you meet someone and you don't know them. And because you don't know them, you are interested in finding, you know, and syncing up, because there's a spark there. And that syncing up happens over time. And, you know, one of the, of course, most delicious parts of being in a new relationship are these long talks, you know, talk all night, have sex talk, right? You spend whole weekends in bed telling the stories of your, you know, misspent youth or whatever. And it's just so good and it's so magical. And what it is you have the spark that comes from opposites attract, because you're strangers essentially. So you have this strong sexual engagement and you're building the relationship. So you find the sameness. You both find out you love oysters, or something like that, right? And it's like, oh my God, I went to this movie premiere, the same place you went, right? And it's like you suddenly discover all the sameness. And that's what makes a relationship work. So that's super, super important. And particularly when you decide you want to marry somebody or have children with them, you should know that your values are aligned, right? So religion, money, sexual orientation, all of those kind of things that you think is aligned, you have to actually find out it's aligned. And only when it's aligned will it work. Otherwise, you're in constant strife. So when people have relationship issues, what they actually have is issues in aligned values or issues in communication. So if you can't agree on money, or you can't agree if your children are being baptized or not, or if you, can never talk with each other without it blowing up, those are relationship issues. They're issues of not enough sameness, right? And so that's when you understand that, then you have to understand that in order to have a functioning long-term relationship, if that's what you choose, you have to find somebody with whom you can align as fully as possible. However, here comes the horrible part. As you align as fully as possible, you become more and more of the same. And the more you become the same, the less that opposite attract. We call it the erotic friction in the work I do, because that says it all, right? There's friction. The friction rubs, it makes it hot. The hotness is the sexual hotness, but the friction is the disagreement. And so I'm sure you know people like that. I know people like that. They have crazy hot sex, but they constantly fight. Their crazy hot sex is usually makeup sex, right? They can't agree on anything. It's horribly contentious, but they have great sex because they're so far apart. As you come closer and closer and closer and closer together, there's less and less and less of a spark, less and less of that. They call it polarity sometimes. The two poles create the arc. Right? We call it erotic fiction, but it's pretty much the same. There's a few details that are different. And what that means is that at some point when you've dated for a while, now you're moving in, right? Now you're in one apartment and your belongings mixed together. And that means, of course, that only the things that you both like make it into the apartment. So there's more sameness. Now you sleep in the same bed all the time, unless you have palatial digs. But, most people want to sleep in the same bed. Then you have common friends. So now you go out together. And lots of people then start a business together, or, do something. They have the same sport or the same activity or the same charity or whatever it is. So suddenly you're always together. There's no more space for that eruption, that flare. And then one fine day, you find yourself on the sofa in your sweatpants with your favorite snack, watching your favorite TV show, and you're holding hands, and it's really nice, and nobody wants to have sex. And that's the moment a lot of people go, oh shit, the relationship is in trouble. But as a matter of fact, the relationship is good, but it's fine. It's the sexual or erotic tension, the sexual attraction that's in trouble. And the good news, though, is that that's much easier to fix than aligning oneself with a relationship. And when you also look at how much time you spend living with somebody versus how much time you spend having sex with somebody, you have to kind of see this all in perspective. And so my job essentially is to teach people, one of my jobs is to teach people how to create that spark at will, which you can, because it's just principles. It's like physics.
Guys, I don't know if you've been following along. We're laughing because we love furniture. But
it's crazy how priorities change.
Dude, you don't even know. All day I think about my apartment.
It brings me so much, it brings me joy.
So much joy.
To create a space I love.
So Justin and I, if you've been listening for a while, we lived in an apartment that I wasn't loving, and now we moved into an apartment that I love, and I have had the best time decorating it. And a lot of that is thanks to Articl, who's our new sponsor. So I actually reached out to Articl a while ago via my blog, the 100 blog, and I started working with them through my blog. So I got the most beautiful sofa that actually pulls out into a bed for our guest room. That's in the office. It's stunning. We sit on it every day. It's like this lush velvet and has the best mattress in it. But then when we started working with them through the podcast, we were able to get a dining room table that I'm obsessed with.
I love it.
It makes me feel like a very special person.
It's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I've never had anything so beautiful in my house.
I just love the like simple, modern, beautiful design, attention to detail. I'm kind of I like to get a deal on furniture, but I'm also a snob about the quality. So if I know it's going to fall apart, I'm like not excited about it. But I got a beautiful coffee table. It has a marble top. And then I got a great bookshelf for my room.
Yeah, that bookshelf is beautiful.
Trying to have my books stare at me more. And I got 4 new chairs for my table.
We need them.
But the great thing about Articl is that like they take out the middleman. So it's us, Articl, and the manufacturer. So there's no showrooms, salespeople, no unnecessary layers that create more cost to the whole process. So we love them. It is really great quality, beautiful, and I think you're going to love it. So you can go to articl.com/almost30 and you'll get $50 off a purchase of $100 or more. So articl.com/almost30, $50 off a purchase of $100 or more.
So you guys, I am having my family come to California for Thanksgiving.
Woohoo!
So that means mom, dad, who are divorced. We still do holidays together. Justin and my sister. And I'm the only vegan, vegetarian one in the family. But I am going to make an amazing meal or have Veggie Girl help me make an amazing meal for the holidays that non-vegans, non-vegetarians will also love.
Yeah, they appeal to non-vegans for sure. The taste is so incredible. They season it so well. The options are endless. Anytime I go into Veggie Girl, like anything I want, salad, bowl, anything, they have it. So for the holiday time, Veggie Grill has their holiday feast. So for $74.95, you can feed 4 adults. And the feast is amazing. It includes a stuffed holiday roast, cornbread stuffing, green bean casserole, mashed yams, the cauli mashed potatoes, which are
bomb. Those are my
favorite. Porcini gravy and cranberry sauce, plus additional sides. So honestly, this feast is great for both vegans and non-vegans. We love it so much. And let us know. Tag us if you go to Veggie Grill, whether during the holidays or not. We love them. It's been a lifesaver on the tour.
I can't wait. So what I'm going to do is just place my order online at veggiegrill.com/holidays, and then I'll pick it up at the location that's closest to me. And then it's all ready. All I've got to do is heat it up and we are good to go for this holidays.
Teach us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how would people get started today if they're sitting on the couch and they're like, oh my God, like I was once like madly in love with this or feeling the spark with this person, and now it's been a couple years or a decade, and what do we do? What's like something they could do today?
In the book, there's one headline that says, "Stop touching!" Exclamation mark. Right? Yeah. Because in a book I write in detail about that because it's such a heavy issue for most people, right? So one of the things that you do is you separate out, right? You spend time apart.
Yes.
Right? Very, very important. One of the things that really kills a relationship is if you have stop having separate friends and separate activities.
Yeah.
You do everything together. And there is something that I want to say a little bit later about people feeling the need to orient themselves so completely after their partner. We'll talk about that. But if somebody says they want to work on this, the first thing you do is you create space. And then in that space, you fill yourself up with new things, right? So you go places or you do things. And even if it's just reading a book or watching something that the other person hasn't watched, so that when you come back together, there's a sense of a slight newness. Mm-hmm. Because it really is about being different, right? And there's more to it. But if somebody wants to get started, the one thing to do that immediately makes a difference is if you stop touching randomly just because that's the thing to do. So a lot of people, particularly as the sexual attraction goes down, they start getting more and more touchy, and they constantly there's some rubbing or pecking on the cheek or stuff like that.
Wow.
And what that does is a little bit like when you run two magnets together, they actually stop being polarized. And it's literally like that. If you constantly touch in an unconscious way, it's different when you say, hey, let's sit on the sofa and cuddle. That's different, right? But if you just rub and touch and kiss without really meaning it, you're training the nervous system to become essentially numb to that touch. And that's one of the reasons why often, after a while, when you kiss the same person, there isn't that thing anymore, right? But you can regain that thing. For instance, if you stop kissing and touching for a day or two consciously and go, okay, we're not going to do that. And then you do it consciously, it reloads as if it was totally fresh because you're not so desensitized. So that's number one, stop touching. Number two, spend some time apart. One of the worst suggestions to give somebody who is no longer having the spark is spend more time together. Go for an intimate dinner. You're already doing too much. The thing is, spend some time apart, go other places, come back with fresh input, then come together properly, right? So those are some of the quick and easy things to do.
It's so interesting. Like, even just thinking about it, like, I'm not in a relationship right now, but when I would have so much anxiety about like thinking about the next time that I could be with that person so that like they would still like me or wouldn't, or you know what I mean? Like, just, it's like that touch thing where I'm like, okay, so like you're around me, you're touching me, I'm great and you want to be with me.
Yes.
And it'll be interesting to like exercise that in my next relationship because we are so busy right now. And so the space is created in that way, but also to intentionally create the space. Like, yes, you go there. I'm going to go here for a week like that.
Well, one of the nice things about getting a bit older, and I know your podcast is about that, reaching that certain point, right, in life, the first of many milestones, which is 30, right? And then comes 40, and then God comes 50. Just insane in itself. One of the nice things about that is as you get a little bit older, and particularly like you're saying, now you're busy, but you're also kind of discovering your worth.
Exactly.
And that makes a huge difference because the kind of guy who you have to worry about that between your date on Monday and your date on Thursday, he goes off you. Is not the guy you want to be in relationship with.
Exactly.
Right? It's just not good. And one of the other things, of course, is that nobody likes a needy woman or a needy guy for that matter. And when you have that feeling that something horrible could happen, that neediness, of course, repels the other person. Because one of the things with the poles is that if you have two north together, they repel each other, right? You have two south together, they repel each other. You have to have a north and a south, so for the magnet to do its thing. And when somebody is needy, that's kind of it pushes the other pole away. Unless you're both so needy that you forever stick together and form some crazy codependent thing. But usually the way it goes is push-pull, right? And when you are busy and when you actually know your worth, you're more apt to be with a man who actually finds that really interesting and finds you really interesting. And, without playing games, not always being available is a really good thing. It's not one of those, oh no, I'm not available. And then you sit at home and chew your paws off because, you you stare at the phone and you hope he texts, but he doesn't. It's not that, but it's the genuine having a life. That makes you interesting and sexually interesting as well.
Yeah, that's just so stressful. Like when you're in a relationship and like they're like touching you and cuddling you and you're like, cool. And then the next second you're like sitting on the couch and they're not. And you're like, oh man.
Yes.
So stressful.
It's bizarre.
It's funny about the touching thing because my boyfriend and I, we touch 24/7. Like if we're together, we're touching and playing. So there is like, I could imagine like a desensitization to
over
each other.
Time, yes.
Yeah. Because we're like enmeshed in that way. So I think that's really interesting. Yeah. I love that.
there's things you can do early on so that the relationship doesn't go south. And this is one of them, right, where you're mindful. There's nothing wrong with touching if you're actually touching for the pleasure of touching that person, and not touching when it's just out of habit or need. But yeah, there's these milestones in a relationship, right? That horrible first moment, the first time when you've been with somebody, that you're dating, and then it's the first night you're not having sex, right? It's just,
it's
God.
like a scene in a movie. Yeah. It is that dramatic.
It's that dramatic. It is.
Yeah, you're like,
it's like,
I'm disgusting.
It's hard to imagine that should be so, but it's, and a lot of men can't understand that, of course, because they're just at a point where they're comfortable enough with you that they don't feel like they need to perform against their bodily needs or something like that, right? But to a woman, it's the end of the world. It really is. In a certain, I'm exaggerating, but
it's funny because like we're totally, I'm speaking for myself, I'm totally fine if we don't, but then I start thinking, oh, does he think that I don't want to? And then
and
like the insecurities come up.
Or what happened and why, and and it's all about the insecurities. And I can promise you, as you get a bit older, that passes.
Okay, cool.
And that's,
I mean, I love having sex. It's just like, there is that anxiety, and I just haven't been in a intimate, deep relationship in a while. So like, my only one is like from college. So I just remember that time when like, I just thought he was like pissed because I didn't want to, and his ego is hurt, and you have to make it up to them and all this stuff.
And that's the bad chain reaction.
Ew, you're like, fine, I'll give you head.
Yes, exactly.
That's like, you're like, oh, it's so bad. I do remember like, I've been with my boyfriend for a long time when we kind of transitioned out of, we've been living together for 5.5 years of like having sex 24/7 and just freaking out and being like so nervous. And, I'm like, not nervous. I just was nervous that he wasn't as interested in me. Obviously I internalized it in like a negative way. And I remember talking to a girlfriend. She's like, do you want to have sex every day or do you want to have good sex twice a week? Like, what do you want? And I'm like, oh, I'd rather have good sex less. And that's now I'm like, okay, I'd rather really enjoy it and be really into it than just be having it to having it.
Yes.
And
I think that is what happens in a good relationship over time, is that, you don't have potato chips every day. I mean, most of us don't have potato chips every day, right? And you don't have potato chips every time you want potato chips, simply because most people's bodies and lives don't lend themselves to having potato chips all the time, right? And most people's lives eventually don't lend themselves to having sex every day. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's a normal development, because as you create that relationship, there's other things in addition to sex. That doesn't mean that your sex life shouldn't be great and fun and alive and full, but there's also, succeeding in your career or having a little bit of time for yourself to explore something new.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it in the long term much more interesting, because if you, coming back to you think every time, oh my God, is this guy going to call again? All of that. What that does is it makes you a lesser human, because now you're no longer sitting and reading.
Exactly.
Now you no longer go to the yoga class because he could have time suddenly, right? You turn down invitations. We've all done it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm as guilty of
that
this.
That was like classic 25-year-old Lindsay. Where it was like, well, if he calls, like, I want to be free tonight just in case. And then he wouldn't call, and I'd be like, tears in
you have
the
your
pillow.
phone like next to you in a workout class.
Literally at like,
you're like
max volume.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend for people if they wanted to start that conversation when, that moment when, or that night, the first night you don't have sex, you know, in a while.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like? Because I would assume it would have to be a conversation, kind of like a light conversation. Do you recommend a conversation?
I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
Because nothing good ever comes from having conversations about sex while you want sex or just had sex or about to have sex.
Okay.
Right? That's a good golden rule.
Yeah.
Usually that's an awkward moment for both people involved.
Okay.
Because the one person goes, oh God, I should just make myself do it, even though for whatever reason. The other person goes, are you going off me? What's happening? Are you pissed? Are you okay? So the best thing to do is to get a good grip on yourself, if that's at all possible, and keep your inside thoughts inside.
Got it. Got it, Michaela.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's one of those duct tape moments, right? And you just have to relax and go, okay, I think it's that moment in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then you watch the behavior, which is usually whoever is the one who didn't want the sex gets a little bit freaked out, right? And backs off. And if you are totally relaxed with it, you'll usually see them relax and come towards you in the relational sense.
I feel that. Okay.
And then life proceeds as usual, and you usually have sex the next night or whatever. And then it finds a rhythm that's not fraught by mutual insecurity.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if stuff starts going funny, right? So it's like one night it's like, oh, I was so late at work. The next night is I'm not feeling well. The third night it's like, I want to stay home. And then of course there's a trend, and then you have to look at that. And at that point, when there is a long-term trend, then you'll address it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But long-term trends usually happen only two ways. One is the thing is over, right? You've dated. Now it's supposed to move on to something else, and it's not, right? That's one way it can go. Or the thing is actually deepening, and in the deepening, other things happen. And that might include being comfortable enough to not have sex just to have sex, right? Because that's what one does every day. And filling more space with relational activity and intimacy and depth, right? And or sometimes life just kicks in and you get super busy. The relationship is great, but relationship is no longer the be-all, end-all in your life because it's taken a certain direction and trajectory. And then that's okay too. But in general, I would say on the first time it happens, hold on to, your pants, your mouth, your brain, your insecurities, and wait it out. And that's really, really important. It's very hard to do, but it's important because in a new relationship, precedence gets established that's really hard to wipe out later.
Yeah.
Right? Once you have funny things and some resentment or something went wrong or the trust was broken, it gets very hard to repair.
I feel like the partner also mirrors your energy too in those situations, especially when there's question and nonverbal communication. So if you're calm and, content, that's interesting.
And, dating, I mean,
tell me about it.
Tell me about it.
I do not envy anyone.
I think about that.
Dating.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think about that once a day.
Yeah.
Thank you, sweet sister.
Just because I couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be confident. I wouldn't be who I am for a lot of reasons, but I just feel like I'm too, I don't know.
I know exactly what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I am who I am. And
you're better.
And it's interesting, how just kind of tracking different friends and when they've found their, partners and how it's perfect for them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't be fully yourself and who you are in this time in your life if you weren't with Justin.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not be fully myself at this time if I was still with my long-term boyfriend. 100%. So it's weird how that happened.
Well, that's another big important piece when you talk about, what I'm personally passionate about. It certainly is the engagement with who you really are, truthfully who you are versus who you think you need to be. And there's a huge gap there for most people. And part of it is society and religion and, culture and stuff like that and your upbringing. And part of it is self-imposed, of course. And so what you were saying there is absolutely right. There is no two people or no two relationships that function the same way. And one of the really, really horrible things is when you assume it has to be a certain way, that's not even right for you. That's the worst part. It's one thing if you really honestly go, I want to marry my high school sweetheart and have two kids and stay at home till the kids are 15 or 16. And then I find some career, right? If that's truly what moves you, then that's great, right? But if that's what you're expected to do because that's what your parents did and your community did and the people in your church did, but inside of you, that's just totally not the thing. You're going to find yourself in a really tough position because you're going to conform to something that's not true, and it makes everybody very unhappy and can cause huge pain and trouble for everyone involved. And so finding out what's actually right for you is really the most important thing before you enter a relationship.
Yeah.
Because then you can also, like you were saying, now you haven't had a relationship in a while and you are busy. So that will necessitate a certain kind of a man. And if you are clear on what you can actually do, and if you're clear on what you actually want, then you have a really good chance. Really good chance.
Yeah.
But if you go out there trying to find Prince Charming with whom you get married next year, when really your life isn't such, and when you would be really honest, aside from the romantic fairy tale notion of being swept away and, all of that, when that subsides enough that you can think clearly and you can say, I'm making this up, but you know what? I want to spend the next 4 or 5 years really building my career. And all I really have is like 2-3 nights a week. And I can't travel right now. And I certainly don't want children. And I really like my independence. Well, that translates into one kind of a man and one kind of a relationship.
Yeah.
Versus I want to find my life partner, settle down and have children in the next 2 years.
How do you figure that out? Like those things out, because it's like your upbringing and the people that you're around and your family and stuff is a part of who you are. So how do you step aside from that and understand what is part of who you are today and what is just a conditioning?
Well, on a bigger level, how you get there is that you become very in tune with your body and your body's messages and sensations, and that your body is part of the, so to speak, advisory board of your life. Right? Because the body never lies and the body never forgets anything. You can emotionally and mentally delude yourself, but the body reacts, right? So what you do in the bigger picture is you become finely tuned to the sensations of your body. And that's done partly by relaxing, tending to the nervous system, releasing old trauma, sensitizing, right? There's all kinds of ways you can go at that. But the other part is that you spend some time, and it's good to do this with friends sometimes. First, you do it alone. You sit down and you describe your ideal relationship. Right? So first you describe your ideal relationship. And then you feel that in juxtaposition to where you're at right now in your life. And you really check if your life and that relationship are aligned. If they're not, then that means one of two things. Either your relationship goals are a bit skewed, or your life needs to change. Right? And you can figure that out usually by speaking with friends, right? Good friends, not the ones that want to sabotage you, where you go, well, I really want to move out to the country the next year and start a family. And somebody goes, right. What happens with the 5 years you've invested in your business? Oh, I can do that from out there while having a baby. Yeah. It's not a problem. I'll commute every day, right? So then you have somebody poke holes in your fairy tale. And then what that will do is will either make you adjust your life or it will make you adjust your fairy tale. So that's first step. Then once you've determined what it is that you think you want, and of course that changes as you grow and, but you start somewhere. Then you go, what kind of a man do I need to fulfill that particular set of circumstances? right? And for instance, the man that is happy with you spending 2 or 3 nights with him, and is happy with you being public on Instagram, whatever, right? Like that kind of a thing is a very different man than the man with whom you move to Iowa to start an organic vegetable farm and have 5 children, right? They're not the same men, and there's different requirements for those situations. So you kind of reverse engineer from your desired relationship purpose, so to speak, to the kind of man that would take. And then you ask yourself, what do I have to offer that kind of a man? And that's usually a moment of rough awakenings, right? Because one of the mistakes that we make, well, there's 2 mistakes we make usually in dating as women. One is that we think that the guy we want wants the qualities that he has in us, which of course is wrong, because that would make it a business partnership or a friendship and not a sexually polarized relationship, right? The guy who kicks ass every day doesn't necessarily want to come home to a woman who's also kicked ass every day and have long business discussions. Some guys, but most guys want to come home and then have something different happen.
Yeah.
Right. Or the other way around. The woman who kicks ass every day, all day, is not going to want to tell a guy what to do in the evening after she's told everybody else what to do all day, right? So you have to be aware of what do you want from your man versus from your job or your friendships. And then what do you have to offer that man so that when he comes home, he's delighted to see you and doesn't necessarily feel like, oh God, another thing. Or you come home and you're like, really? Couldn't even buy some milk, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of a thing. There's, and so that's how you determine that. And as you determine that, then you can actually hone in on a dateable man for you. And of course, there's chemistry and all kinds of stuff, but certain people are just a no-go because of the set of circumstances.
Totally.
Right. And if the purpose of your life and your relationship, for instance, is crazy, wild, adventurous sex and travel, you certainly wouldn't date a man who has 2 young children from his first marriage.
Right.
Doesn't matter how much you're attracted to him and love him.
Yeah.
That's not your guy.
Yeah.
But this is the other mistake we make. We date potential.
Oh, say that
So
again.
true. My mom said that about my dad.
Oh God,
We
really?
date potential because we think, why? Because we think we can make
like,
them
I gotta
better and change them. And
change
I mean,
them.
it's story of my life.
Yeah,
Yes.
women always think that.
Well, we do because it's kind of
whatever.
interesting. Women are built to see potential,
Yeah, that's true.
right? We are essentially built to see this tiny little baby we have birthed and imagine that tiny little baby as an adult, responsible human being, right? And, see a dirty apartment and imagine what it will look like with a little bit of paint and so on and so on, right? See an outfit in the store and imagine what it looks like with just the right shoes. So that's what we're
true.
built for. It's the problem with dating a man who has potential is that you're essentially saying who you are right now is not okay, but when I'm done with you, you'll be just fine. Right. And what that means is it sets you up to be a maternal figure or his boss.
You don't want to fuck your mom.
Yeah, absolutely not. Exactly. Because you don't fuck your boss or your
Son.
Ideally. If you're in your right mind, you don't. Yes. So there's a kink for everyone, but in general, you don't. Right. So you set yourself up in an unfuckable situation, but
Totally.
also you're depriving that person, that man in this case, of acknowledgement and a pride in who he is. And, when a woman says, wow, this is a great guy, but, he needs to wear better clothes and get a better job. It's the same thing as if a man would say to his friends, well, she's a great girl, but you know what? She needs a nose job and a boob job and lose 20 pounds.
I always think about that.
Ouch.
I'm like, if
Right?
guys said that about, because girls say that, they're like, he used to dress better. he should do all this. And like, if a guy said that about his girlfriend,
it would be World War III.
World War III.
Yeah, right. But that is when you say to a guy, well, if you could just get a better job, make more money, drive a nicer car, wear better clothes, have better friends. You're saying, I don't like you until you change. Right. And of course, when a guy does that, it's pretty dicey because what else is he going to do when somebody tells him to? Right. You can trust a guy like that on the other end. You want him to do the things you want him to do, but when he does them, it's so unattractive, right? Just, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
How about this shirt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah.
So Justin was working in commercial real estate in New York and quit his job to teach himself how to code. He is a mobile app developer and he taught himself to code using things like Skillshare. And he actually uses Skillshare and learned a lot of the skills he has now in his dream job and career on Skillshare. So I am a huge fan of Skillshare.
It's crazy. Like I didn't know this type of thing existed where there are so many experts and just people who have really had experience, whether it's in writing or photography, film, business. Like
there's like blogging on there, podcasting. There's basically everything that you would want to do or learn about. You can learn about at the comfort of your own home using Skillshare. So we are huge fans of forever learning, knowing as much as we can. And especially if you're in a career and you sort of want to explore making a switch or figure out what you're passionate about, Skillshare provides a place where you can figure out your passion and learn more about things in your pajamas.
Yeah, it's the best. I'm actually, right now I'm deep into, it's called Powerful Storytelling Today, Strategies for Crafting Great Content. And that's taught by Soledad O'Brien, who I love. But there's just so many, like learn how to mix music with Young Guru. What? You know what I mean? Anything you want, you can find here.
I need to be Young Guru.
Same. But what's so great is that you can connect with peers. So you can share work and insights with the community. There's over 3 million members and you learn by doing. So it's real-time learning. I am a visual learner, so it's nice to see someone on the screen as well.
Shot really nicely.
It's shot really nicely. And you can really stay ahead of the curve in this way. So if you know that your industry is progressing in a certain direction, you can hop right on Skillshare and get it done.
Yeah, love it.
Love it. So for our listeners, really exciting. You can go to Skillshare.com.
This is a very big deal.
Skillshare.com/almost30. And you get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. Okay? I'm going to shout it. Skillshare.com/almost30. And for 99 cents, you get 2 months of Skillshare free. 20,000 classes for 99 cents. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/almost30. Four Sigmatic, the OG.
Yeah, the OG.
Truly.
It's just like the tried and true. This morning I had the latte. So they have a matcha latte with maitake mushroom. Just really good. All I needed was a little dash of coconut milk, blended up. And I mean, I'm saving all that money from going and grabbing a matcha latte. 100%. And I feel great. It's a clean energy all day. It's the best. I can just always count on them.
Completely. And yeah, that's the thing. You can count on them. You trust them. We spoke to Tara recently. That episode is coming out in November. But and if it's past November, you can look back too. But he was relentless, like just in trying to find the ingredients that he trusts, that are ethically sourced, that are clean. And because we asked him about a certain product, we're like, when is it coming back? And he's like, hey, I haven't found like ingredients that like are good enough for you guys yet. I was like, good answer. So they really truly care. They are fearless in the way that they promote these adaptogenic mushroom blends. Truly, there's magic in these things. So if you haven't tried Four Sigmatic, I would highly, highly, highly recommend. It's great just to create your own little ritual, maybe settle anxiety, perhaps energize you if you need to before a workout. They kind of have something for everyone in every type of situation. So you can go to foursigmatic.com/almost30 and you'll actually land on our page, and we have some of our favorite Four Sigmatic products, and then use the code almost30 at checkout for 15% off your first order. Can we dig into the relationship with your own pleasure and how that translates in relationship with another person in terms of pleasure and why that's important and how we go about doing that.
Oh, that's such a good topic.
I know, it's a big one.
So, women are built for pleasure, right? Uniquely built for pleasure. And when you look at like women's orgasms versus men's orgasms, for instance, right?
Yeah, which one feels better?
Well, I'm not a man, so it's hard to tell. But reportedly, we have many different areas in the body that can light up with massive pleasure. We have many different spots in our genitals that can light up with massive pleasure. While with men, it's a fairly localized thing until they learn how to spread the sensation around, which men can. And then men report equally full-bodied pleasure. But in general, for, survival, so to speak, women have to have a lot of energy in their lower body because you have to conceive. You have to ovulate, right? Then you have to conceive. Then you have to maintain a pregnancy. Then you have to give birth. Then you have to feed the baby from your own body. All the while you have to keep track of where the baby is. And, all of these kind of things require that our entire body is involved and not just the head. And so we are built to have a lot of energy and a lot of pleasure and a lot of aliveness in the lower parts of our body. And a lot of blood can go there and, sensation can arise. But because we live the kind of life we live, right? The three of us, we're sitting here in chairs, right? After I've driven for 2 hours and,
I know.
You've been on the computer most likely and, so on and so on. All our energy pools up here where it's needed in the head, neck, and shoulders. And that energy is pulled away from the areas of the body that have pleasure and aliveness. So for most people, their body isn't that accessible to them other than they have a moment of turn on or something hurts. The body is kind of just there while the head and mind does what it does. And that is a problem because, well, for many reasons. For one, it's not fun. Another aspect is you are not using a vast amount of your available potential and capacity. And you are devoid of the sensations that actually allow you to, let's say, regulate your eating naturally, give you a good, strong sex drive, give you intuition, give you creativity. All of that sits down there, so to speak. Yeah. And if that's not available to you because you can't feel it, it might as well not be there. So that's why pleasure is so important. Pleasure is what drives creativity, also is what drives money, interestingly enough, right? In an interesting way, creativity, money, sexuality are all the same thing. And if that area is not very alive, you're not actually using the force that's in your body for fucking eating, making money, or, whatever is down there. And so reconnecting with pleasure in the body is very, very high on my list of priorities after a day of work or, after an intense teaching run, because it's completely okay and normal for it to go, because it's actually not useful. When you have a day of emails, right, or right now, as we're sitting here focusing on something specific, too much pleasure isn't practical. But it's just not, right? If I drive down the 405, I don't need to have orgasms.
Right.
Or I get my best.
What about those people that have orgasms constantly?
That disease.
Yes. Poor thing.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely debilitates you.
But I know
that's
what you
not to
mean.
say that you couldn't have pleasurable sensations while you are driving. You can, but it's not necessarily the best use of energy distribution.
Right.
Problem with that is that which you do the most is your prevailing pattern. And so if you spend every day, all day doing, writing emails, driving, telling people what to do, that's the muscle you're developing.
It's actually my life.
Yeah. Well,
like,
yeah.
Krista?
Yes. Yeah. So you have this, you do biceps curls with just one arm. So you have this one really, really big arm, right? And the other one is all atrophied. And that's a little bit like that. We have the strong get shit done muscle and this weak pleasure muscle. And so we always have the pleasure available. The muscle around it isn't that trained. Right?
Yeah.
And so you can train the pleasure muscle. And it doesn't mean sexual pleasure. It means sensual aliveness. It means awakenings of the body, like the body being awake and available to you. And then with that, it's not as hard to get, let's say, to an orgasm as when you're totally numb. And so one of the things that I teach about and wrote about is what I call background pleasure. So meaning you always have a pleasure available to you in your body. You just don't pay attention. So right now, if you kind of rub your, your garment on your shoulder, let's say, or something like that, or move your hair so that it touches the neck, you can immediately feel pleasure. Nobody did anything to you. You didn't have external stimulus.
Right.
But I can move a little bit, or you can take your bra off, and it's like, freedom, that kind of a thing. So you always have pleasure available, exactly like that. You can always move your hips a bit, or wiggle your toes, or feel or touch your, leg or something, so that the attention goes into the body. And then your body is a little bit more alive. And then when you want to have sex, for instance, you don't go from 0, being totally numb, to 100, which is orgasm. You're already at like 40, 50, 60. And with that extra aliveness, you'll also be able to bridge the gap from, get shit done to date night, right? Because that's hard to do when you have a busy life. So you have to completely turn your attention around. And so background pleasure, like on the way home, or when you're on the computer, ever so often stop. Little rituals that, like what you just did, with spraying yourself with something, right? Drinking a cup of tea, having a ball under your foot while you're working. That's my newest little kick.
Oh, yeah. How crazy is it how much tension is in your feet?
In the feet, exactly. So you can, with very, very, very simple, easy steps, keep your body sensually engaged and alive. Essential oils, flavored water, whatever it is that gives you that feeling of, there's more to this than my head and the computer.
Yeah, I love that.
That's really good.
Okay, so we talked about the energy distribution. I wanted to talk about on your men's retreats, like, because we focus so much on, females, like what we could do. What is it like to lead these male retreats, and what are some of the learnings from this, and how could we engage men more to be as interested in this as we are?
Great question. Yes, very good question. Well, one of the things that I think is important to understand, and this is a very broad statement, right? It's one of those black and white statements that needs to be filled in with a lot of different shades. But most men are not as interested in relationship as most women. They're just not.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because when you look at, your relationship, I don't know anything about it, right?
Perfect and amazing. Go on.
So I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want to be with a guy who sits home every day just waiting for you.
Yeah, puke.
And then when you come home, he's like, how was your day? What can we do? I missed you. I made you a cake, and now I'm sitting here waiting for you. And what can I do? What can we do? Right? I mean, that would be pretty traumatic.
Traumatic is actually the perfect word for that. That would be traumatic.
You'd be like, back off me, right? Yes. You wouldn't want that. You want to come home and find...
And have them ignore me and like...
not necessarily ignore you, but have a life, right? Have a life and have something to do and have something to be passionate about.
Yeah.
And kick some ass in his chosen field. And that's what makes a man interesting. Very few women go... there are some women, but very few women would prefer the incredibly dumb but very good-looking surfer boy to the incredibly smart and very accomplished rich man who is not quite as good looking. Right? Because and money, by the way, it's not the money in itself, it's the capacity to get things done that's translated into money. Right?
That's
if you want to have children with one of the two, which one are you going to have children with? Right? So that's just good sense.
Yeah.
Shiny surfer boy is nice for a roll in the hay, but shiny surfer boy is not with whom you want to combine yourself for marriage and children.
Yeah.
Right? So unless, of course, you're so high powered that you need the relief of shiny surfer boy, but that's a different story then. Right?
Yeah.
Because then you're just minding your own business and having an accessory.
Yeah.
Which is fine. And I know women like that who are very happy. But if you want a guy to have a life and a career and a purpose, you don't want him to be that engaged with relationships, right? But what you do want is that when he is available, he is actually available. Meaning he has open available time when it's time to have that time. And that's a really important distinction to make when working with men, is that men have very different values. For most men, one of the highest values is freedom, right? For most women, one of the highest values is being loved and loving, right? That's not exclusively true. Like, for instance, I value my freedom, I want to say equal to love, at least, but for most people, this brings us back to the staying home and waiting for the text, right? We value love more than freedom for the most part. So we rather are caged in the apartment waiting for a text than being out there doing our own thing. But we want to be with men who value their freedom more than their love, so to speak, so that they are useful as humans, right? And applying themselves fully. To which degree depends on the kind of relationship you have, right? If you want to be with an adventurous man who travels the world, you probably need somebody who wants more freedom than when you want to have 6 kids, right? That's a given. But in working with men, what we look at, and I have a male teaching partner, which is really, really great because
we should have him on. We should have him on.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
And you'll love him because he's a Scot. He's born in Scotland.
Oh, wow.
Has the most fantastic accent.
What is Scottish accent?
Well, he doesn't
Lindsay?
sound Scottish anymore because he's lived in England for a long time, but he has got this nice English accent. But that's not his first prevailing feature, but that's very fun to speak with in a podcast. He's got this big red beard and gigantic curly hair. He looks very Viking.
Done and done.
What makes him interesting and why I love teaching with him and traveling with him, is my business partner, is that he is very much a man's man, right? Meaning he started martial arts when he was 3, engaged in meditation starting at that time, was on the Scottish national fencing team, was a musician, a very, very well paid, very, very good session guitarist, has worked with men for 10 years on the areas of dating and relationship and sexuality. So he's super well-rounded and he's a freak about meditation. And so he is someone who can work with men in the domain of freedom because it's certainly his highest value. But he also knows a lot about women and is very well versed in the relational aspect with women, that he can help men with that. And so when we teach men's retreats, he will work with men on creating kind of integrity in their body where they're uncompromising but not assholes, right? Meaning they're free to make choices and then commit to those choices fully, versus wanting something but not wanting to say it and getting shifty in relationship. And you know those guys, right? They say one thing and they mean another, and they don't have their sexual stuff worked out. So you always have to worry if they're cheating or doing weird stuff. So there's a way to work with men to empower them so that they're, so to speak, naturally in integrity. And that's done with a combination of moving the body, stilling the mind. So meditation is a huge aspect. It's not so much for my women's work. But for the men, we work a lot with meditation as kind of an entry into dealing with impulse control, dealing with strong emotions, dealing with weird, kinks and stuff that are unresolved. And so men's retreats look very, very different.
Wow.
It could be they sit for 3-4 hours and say not a word.
Wow.
They're in nature. They make fires. They engage with nature in some way. They do movement, right? And stuff like that. So my job in the men's retreats is to provide the perspective of a woman and to talk about the things that we as women want and how certain things are perceived, which most men are fairly blind to, because how would they know? And then Steve's job is to actually work with the body and the mind and the attention and provide the actual instruction also in the sexual areas, so that men are free to choose, not from some weird contraction and kink, but from a place of being free. Because that's what you kind of want in a guy, that he comes to you freely, and not because you were really good at manipulating him.
So true.
Yeah.
I'd love, before we wrap up, to talk about your book, Wild Woman's Way.
That's so good. It's such a good That's such a good title.
Great title.
Thank you.
You're a wild woman.
I'm certainly a wild woman.
I love you.
And not in the sense that I'm crazy or, fangs and stuff. That's part of it. I can go pretty, but the wild woman is really an archetype that means you're connected to your nature, right? And that means knowing who you are. And that's when I'm just about to start teaching this weekend, right? What we do is we figure out how does each woman express. It's very different for each woman. It's not a cookie cutter goddess thing. It's like who am I and how do I want to be in the world? What are my gifts in the world? How do I connect with who I really am and bring that forth, versus bending myself in a pretzel to be something for somebody else? And so the wild woman is the archetype that has both the incredible wildness of nature moving through you, right? Life moving through your body. And that includes your intuition. That includes being in tune with your own body, with nature, with animals, with life itself, right? So it's a part of us that's never left the natural world, so to speak. And within that, there is sub-archetyped, so to speak, right? The healer, the wise woman, the witch, right? The sorceress, the seductress, right? So then you can kind of fill that in with all the different aspects of you and let them all come out and play and shine. So that's kind of what the book's about, is how do you express as a human within the context of rewilding, going away from that incessant influence of outside, and within that, the book has chapters on dating, chapters on relationship, a chapter on orgasms, talks about trauma in the body and how trauma in the body manifests, talks about energy distribution, it talks about getting older, since that's where I'm headed, children or no children, what are the considerations around having children, career, so there's all these aspects that I'm looking into, and how do you come back to yourself, and how do you figure out who you really are, boundary setting, those kind of things. So that's all in there. And then the last part of the book, which is the part that I'm the happiest about, is all exercises and practices. Cool. And there are all these things we just talked about, right? The getting into the body, feeling the body, pleasure practices, movement practices, releasing of old shit practices, rituals, little sensuality hacks, engagement with nature, engagement with animals. So there's the whole third part of the book is just stuff you can do. And I made it so that you can do it in a minute or two, or you can spend a long time, because most people don't have a lot of time. And it should be things you can just incorporate into your life, like spraying a little bit of stuff on you that reminds you have a body, or rolling the thing. And then when you have more time, you can do these things in more depth. So that's the quick rundown on the book. And I'm really, really happy about it, because it was such a bizarre thing to do the book because I had to do it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. I had the 6-week summer break last summer. 7 weeks to be exact, but the first week was one of these crazy humorous things. I rented a cabin in Holland at what I thought was the beach. And I had this romantic notion of spending my first week as a writer in this cabin by the beach. And I was going to write and then I was going to go for walks. Wow. Turns out the cabin was a shed in the backyard of a house where some old, very lecherous dude lived who spent his entire day, I don't know,
chopping
15
wood.
feet from me on a table smoking and coughing.
Just like staring at you.
Oh my God.
It wasn't so much scary. He was not super creepy. He was just, every time I walked
Creature.
by, he looked at me and winked and stuff.
Oh, God.
And the house was technically in the dunes, but the dunes, it took 2.5 hours to get to the dunes to the ocean.
So you're in the middle of nowhere.
I didn't go anywhere. I went there once. It took me
Airbnb?
all day to go. Then I couldn't get the Airbnb.
Yeah.
I couldn't get an Uber back because it was too late. It was like a 6-hour trip all around. I never went back to the beach. Now I was stuck in this tiny, very charming, but tiny cabin outside of this guy's backyard table.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to write. And it was not good. It was not good. I don't think I ever ate as much as in that week. That's all I did essentially, and watched endless episodes of, I think, Mad Men or something like that, right? Like so nothing happened. So that was my first week of writing. It was not nearly as romantic and restorative as I thought. So then I came home and then I knocked the book out in 6 straight weeks.
Wow.
And then submitted the book, went back on the road, and then through a series of circumstances that had to do with my editor taking on another book in between, I was supposed to deliver the book December 15th, and then December 1st, my house burnt down. And so,
oh my God,
one of the reasons I'm so happy about the book and so excited about it being out was that I had to do the whole second draft, so to speak, that the things required, there was like fleshing out of chapters and stuff like that. Post fire.
wow.
Without electricity we still didn't have electricity or internet. And my deadline was pushed back to January 15th. So I did it like in a week in January after having somewhat gotten a few sweaters and a few socks and, establish some kind of a life again. And so it's really, it was like a baptism by fire kind of a situation.
Wow.
And so I'm quite happy with it being out and
Should be really proud.
Yeah.
making it, my baby making its way out in the world.
Yes.
Well, before we started the podcast, we talked a lot about Michaela. Her house burnt down in the California fires. So she was in Ojai. She lost everything. Her husband was able to get out. Some of her animals on her farm were not. So yeah, that's very real here in California, all the fires that are happening.
Yeah, it was crazy. And the thing that saved me was essentially everything that was in the book. Right? All those practices, all that staying in the body, not checking out, making sure that every day had something that oriented me towards the things that were important to me. One of the first things I did the moment I could leave at the area, I went to a flower, like a nursery down in Ventura, and I bought whatever they had that was blooming, which was not much in December. There were a few poinsettias and something, right? And I put it all at the front door of the place I was staying. Everything was charred and burned, but I had these 4 blue pots with these 4 blooming flowers. And that's what kept me going, right? That orientation towards beauty and life and pleasure. And so here we are.
Wow.
9 months later and the book's out. And
So excited.
Yeah.
Can't wait for y'all to listen.
I know. Listen and read the book.
Read the book.
Yeah, we're grateful that you made your way down.
I
It was a long
know.
drive, so thank you.
Yeah.
So how can people connect with you?
My website, which I'm assuming you'll put in the show notes,
Yes,
right?
we
It's
will.
michaelaboehm.com, which is not that easy to spell.
We got you, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. So you'll spell it out. And on the website, there's absolutely everything. I have
it's a great website.
80 plus hours of free content on SoundCloud. I have like information about the different stuff on the front page of the website. There's all kinds of resources, and then, I have an Instagram account, which I carefully populate with my animals and dogs and cats and things. So if you're not up for much information, but for lots of pretty things, my Instagram's the way to go.
Aww.
So great.
My little scruffy dogs.
So sweet.
Can't wait to see.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here.
Thank you
We
for
should come
having
to a
me.
retreat in Ojai.
Oh,
Yeah.
Lindsay.
I would love that. I would love that.
Do
For
come.
our relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
So we get embodied.
Little Tantra, babe. Yeah, literally. Okay, well, we love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
And thanks, everyone, for listening. We will see you next
See you
time.
next week. Bye.
Michaela.
Love her. I want to take a
I could have
course.
conversations like that every day of my life.
Yeah, I know.
I can never know enough.
I know.
Truly.
We needed to do more of that. Thank you so much for coming.
We love you, Michaela. Oh, I wanted to shout out 3 members of Almost 30 Nation who came to ride with me at Soul Cycle. There were 3 sisters. And they were so sweet. Claire, Charlotte, and Courtney.
Where are they from?
Shit. Don't ask me a question I don't know.
I know. Shit.
No, actually, no, they're here. They're here in LA.
Awesome.
I thought they were visiting because I'd never met them, but they're here in LA and they're so sweet. And just thank you. They all listen and they've shared it with friends and just shared that it impacted their life. So shout out to the 3 of you, and sisters are so special. It's always, you know what I mean? When you meet family, we meet a lot of like moms and daughters who listen. I just
a lot of moms and daughters.
So cute.
Cool moms.
Cool moms.
Cool moms.
My mom was listening the other night, like late at night. She was laying with my dog to the Tim Braun episode. And she's like, hey, I love that episode. Could you let me know the underwear company you're promoting now? I want to buy some new underwear. It's like, no problem.
Yes.
You will a warrior.
There you go. Some really good underwear. Also make sure Podcast Pro. So you're Podcast Pro. If you've ever wanted to start a podcast, this 6-week course with Lindsay and I will help you to get your podcast from idea to iTunes. So we are excited to be launching this. There are limited spaces for this. We will fill up. So make sure to register for that now.
Yeah, we're so excited. There's room for everyone. We want you to be successful and just put your best foot forward. Learn from a lot of mistakes that we've made.
Yes.
And we're just, pumped about this in the new year. All right. We love you.
We love you. See you guys
the best
later.
day.
Bye.